I was born in Seguin, Texas, Guadalupe County, on December 28, 1932. We moved from Seguin to San Marcos when my father was approached by Mr. Joe Freeman, who had purchased several thousand acres of ranch land here in San Marcos, between here and Wimberley. And Mr. Freeman approached my father and asked him if he would like to move here and help him run the ranch. And my father agreed because at that time it was during the Depression. He was working for WPA in Seguin, digging ditches in the streets for $1 a day. And of course, a lot of people were very poor at that time, and a lot of people were receiving food from a program called Relief. And my father did not like that. He would rather work and make ends meet as best as he could, rather than stand in line and wait for groceries from the relief program. He started working on the ranch, rebuilding fences. He got help. They got him some more help, and he started rebuilding fences, and eventually they started bringing in Hereford cattle. Way later on, Santa Gertrudis cattle, and of course a lot of sheep and goats, and and the horses, of course. And he would get up in the morning, feed the horses, saddle the horse, and go out and check the cattle. And he was a cowboy, I guess you could say, a vaquero. The pay was $35 a month, plus we had the roof over our head, and we had access to cow milk. We made our own butter, chickens. We had all the meat we could eat, and a garden. Grew up on the Freeman Ranch, as well as all my brothers and sisters. Yes, we grew up there, and we would come to school. Daddy would bring us, and we stayed with a family here in San Marcos, the Gonzalez family, and boarded us there with them. He would bring us on Sunday night, leave us there, and we would, he enrolled us in at St. John's Parochial School, and we stayed there all week. He would come and pick us up Friday night, take us home for the weekend, and bring us back Saturday or Sunday night. The Freemans built a beautiful rock house, I guess about half a mile from where we lived. And of course they had it beautifully landscaped and all. So my job was to go out there and turn the water on and water the plants and rake the leaves and just walk around the place. And I liked to stay over there because it was a new house, it was a pretty house, the landscaping was beautiful. I developed a great love for plants and trees, and also a great love for reading, because the Freemans had a big well. It was a whole room where the water well was, and they stored books and magazines there. So I would spend a lot of time in there reading books like Reader's Digest, Kiplinger's, National Geographic, and those are the type of books that I really grew up with, and I just couldn't read enough. I developed such a love for reading, because the more I read, the more I learned about this, that, and the other. I was reading how to do budgeting and saving money and earning money when I was 9 and 10 years old. Besides making butter and our buttermilk and what have you, by the way, we were all taught how to milk a cow and ride a horse. And my father taught us to shoot a gun as well. Anyway, one of my best and happiest memories of the ranch was during the holidays when my mother would make tamales, and we would gather around the table, and some of my aunts would come and help, because it's a long process making tamales. And I learned as a child how to put the masa on the corn chuck or shuck. I have problems sometimes with my CH and SH. And cooking tamales, which, by the way, Mr. Harry Freeman loved. He couldn't wait for the holidays because he had to have some of Mom's tamales. Sure. Besides the cooking there and making of tamales, another thing was my mother and my grandmother making soap, lye soap. They used the tallow, is that what you call it, from the cows that they killed, and lye, and Lord knows what all else, but I remember it smelling really bad. I didn't like to when they made soap. But of course, I guess everybody else did, because that's what we used to wash clothes. And I remember a big old iron pot in the middle of the yard with some fire under it and boiling the white clothes so they would come out real white. But I remember Daddy bringing home once in a while a little goat or a little sheep whose mother had died, or the mother was sick and couldn't take care of it, and he would bring it home, and we had to bottle feed it. And we also took care of a couple of little deer, baby deer, that Daddy would find, you know, starving to death. The mother had either been killed or was sick or something, and these little deer were found, and Daddy couldn't stand seeing a sick baby animal, and so he would bring it home, and we would raise it with a baby bottle, and until the animal got big enough to just go away, walk away from us. I remember I cried once because we had one and we named it Bambi, just like the one we read about in the books and all. So when Bambi left one day and never came back, I cried for a whole week. St. John's Parochial School was the only school that I attended up to the 8th grade. When it reached the 8th grade, and that's the highest grade that they had, I should have gone to the junior high up at the university, because we didn't have a public school buildings then in San Marcos. We used university property to have our public school. But by then, my mother had several other children, and my father, I guess like many other families, Hispanic families, believed that a girl really didn't need that much education, so I was asked by my father to stay home and help Mother with the children and with the cooking and with all the household chores. And although I loved school very much and I would have liked to keep on, I just decided to abide by his rules and just stayed home, as well as my sister. And so I never graduated from public school. I never made it to the 12th grade until way after I was married. I think I had been married about 6 or 7 years when I went back to night school. And I went for, I guess about 18 months. And then Mrs. Sarah Altenhoff, who was a public school teacher here, said that I was ready to take my GED test, which I did. And she said that when the results came back, she said that I was one of the highest achievers on a GED test, and she encouraged me to go to college. We had the most wonderful nuns out of Victoria, and they were the Incarnate Word Sisters, and they were German. They were very, very good. They were very strict. Didn't allow us to speak Spanish. They told us it was for our own good. So I remember I loved to talk a lot, and in the playground I would forget and start speaking Spanish, since it was my first language. So Sister Agnes would say, Ofelia, you're not supposed to be speaking Spanish. You have to learn English, remember. If you want to learn a lot, learn everything you can, you have to speak English. So I'm going to have to send you over to clean the vigil lights. The vigil lights are those little red and white candles by the altars of church that got really, really black. So I would be handed a cloth with a little oil in it, and there I would be cleaning vigil lights as punishment. I would do that for about 15-20 minutes, and then I would go out and play again. But we had upwards of 300 children. They called us Mexican Americans back then.
Okay.
And there was another school where everybody was Hispanic. I understand there wasn't a single Anglo at that school. And it was called the South Side School, which to this day is called Bonham. But back then it was called South Side. And that's where all the Hispanics went to public school. Because at the parochial school you had to pay tuition. And although it was only 50 cents a month, a lot of families couldn't afford 50 cents a month. And so even us, my mother would sometimes send butter and eggs to the nuns in lieu of the tuition. Older children, 3 of my older children got to go to Catholic school for a few years, but then after it closed down, we had no choice but public school. I had a couple of bad experiences with our school system. One was the fact that I felt that the cheerleader program was a little bit biased in that there were no Hispanic girls in their cheerleader program. Not too many in the band, and a lot of it may have been economics, but I also felt that, if the school board tried better, they could have brought more in. The other issue was the dress code. At that time, we had a superintendent that did not allow the students to wear jeans and t-shirts. The boys' hair must not be longer than the middle of your ear. And I felt that studies would be more important than what you wore to school or how long your hair was. And also I kept looking for books that had anything to do with Mexicans or Hispanic history in the library, and I could never find any. And so all of those things just kind of came together, and I said, well, we need to do something. And that wasn't the only one. There were other people in the community that kept complaining about the same thing. So we looked around, and nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to run for the school board. You do it. No, I'm a woman, I can't. Oh, but you can. Yes, you can. You're more interested in this, and you're interested in that, and you're the right person for it. So I said, well, okay, I guess I'm it. And but I don't have the money. I don't have I thought about clothing. I thought about several things that I would need. Oh, we'll supply that. We'll do that. We'll help you with a campaign. And I have always been the type of person that likes to get involved, that if I believe in something, I better get involved and do something about it. So I had joined the League of Women Voters. I had involved my girls in the Brownies and then Girl Scouts. I had joined a club called the Gardenia Club, which was a social club in town. I had joined a couple of church organizations that I saw that were proactive in terms of, you know, being active in the church and whatever. And so I just couldn't sit still. Whatever I saw that I could do for the benefit of a lot of people, I wanted to do it. And so I had the support of the League of Women Voters. They helped me with money. They helped me with writing out my ads. And there was an organization of men back then, and women as well, Women's Auxiliary, called the American GI Forum. They helped me financially, and they helped me to walk the streets for me and pass out literature and what have you. Consequently, I won the race by a pretty good margin. And to the surprise of many people in town, I won for the school board. But they were terrible years because we had the famous boycott, school boycott during that time. And of course it was controversial because the rest of the school board members felt that the students were violating the law, and they wanted to bring in a lawsuit against those board members that had supported the boycott and the people in the community that had supported the boycott. Of course, that didn't go anywhere. And but eventually we won, and things settled down, and things began to look better. They started hiring more Hispanic teachers and one counselor and more staff in the front office, and things started getting better. They started bringing in textbooks that talked about Hispanic history, and things did get a little better. Yes, 3 years was enough because it was very time-consuming for me. Some of the meetings lasted until 1 o'clock in the morning. All the discussion back and forth, and then do we get a mediator for this? Do we do this? Do we do that? And I would get home at 1:30, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning, and I would have to look around and see if the children had done their homework. Their father was tired and already asleep, and it got to be quite a heavy load. And by then I was working full-time because we needed the money, you know, with so many children in school. And I had to get up like at 5 o'clock in the morning to get everybody ready, and then I played taxi, dropping children at high school, at junior high, at elementary, at kindergarten, and I was just running myself ragged. Half time I would work in the office at Community Action, and half of the time at the health department at the courthouse under Community Action. They needed a bilingual person there, so I was it. And eventually I worked my way up to executive director. Altogether I worked 27 years for Community Action when I retired. But the Mexican-American community used to have a big 16 de Septiembre celebration every year. And there used to be, where Parque Cuauhtémoc is right now, there used to be an open platform. It didn't have a roof. It was a cement slab with benches all around it, and during the celebration there used to be booths put up all around, different kinds of food booth, game booth, and a big stage where a band would play. And they had ceremonies about letting people know about the Mexican Revolution, about how we got free from Spain and all of that. And we met in the dance floor. You know, the girls used to sit on the benches, and the boys would stand, and they would come and ask the girl to dance. We would get up and dance. Then we would come, and they brought us back to our seat, put us in our seat there, and they would go back, and that's how we met. It was way different from now, because we didn't have dates way back then. Like, I never went to a movie with Joe. We never went to the movies. We never went out on a date. Oh heavens, my father would not have allowed it. He was so strict. But we wrote letters to each other. By the time we got married, I had a stack of letters this high, and so both of us did. And so then his parents went to meet my parents and ask for my hand in marriage.
That was my next question.
And so my father said, well, come back in 2 weeks and we'll give you an answer. So that was the protocol, you know. You didn't give your daughter away right away, you know. You had to go back for an answer. So then I would like for them to know that this community started out as part of Mexico, as part of being Spanish, and that at some point when the North Americans came, we had somewhat of a hard time for a while, but that eventually it's like the pendulum, you know, but the main thing is to be united, and hopefully all of us will be one big family, helping each other, doing for each other, not I'm better than you, but that, you know, we would all be in the same melting pot. And the reason I say that is because I see my own family. There are right now at least 8 or 9 of us intermarried into Anglo family. I have 3 son-in-laws who are Anglo, a couple of daughter-in-laws, a great number of nieces and nephews married to Anglos. So, you know, pretty soon that melting pot is going to, so many of my children are half and half, and yet I want them to be proud, like my 9-year-old grandson, who was asked in school, are you Mexican or are you Anglo? And he goes very proudly and says, I'm half and half. So yes.